You're listening to Philadelphia City Council Live here on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM. I'm your host, Vincent Thompson, principal at Thompson Media Man Communications. Mayor Jim Kenney is running for re-election for a second four-year term. In the May 21st Democratic primary, he is being challenged by Philadelphia State Senator Anthony Hardy Williams and former City Controller Alan Buckovitz. The winner of the Democratic primary faces Republican candidate lawyer William Billy Ciancaglini in the November general election. A lot of things have happened over the last 3.5, 4 years in Mayor Jim Kenney's term, so we wanted to discuss his first term, what he thinks he deserves for a second term, and other issues that faces the mayor. So I want to welcome Mayor Jim Kenney to Philadelphia City Council Live. As the incumbent, you are favored to win re-election. All the independent polling says you are in the lead, but you know there's many citizens, some in the African-American community, who are unhappy with your performance. You've spelled out why people should re-elect you, but do you understand why some folks in the black community aren't happy with you?
I think there's folks in the white community are not happy with my performance either. There's probably people in the Asian and Latinx community that's not happy with my performance. I mean, the thing about politics and government is you can't make everybody happy. You can listen to what people have to complain about or criticize you about and try to address them and change their view of you. But I treat everybody the same. I have made efforts to take up issues that sometimes get me in trouble with others who are not so open-minded. My battles with Trump are not putting me in great stead with some people in the neighborhood where I grew up, for example. So I do and say what I think is the right thing, and people can either judge me, vote for me, or not vote for me based on what I say and do.
Now, 4 years ago, you received about 46% of the African-American vote in the 2015 Democratic primary. There were 6 candidates, including yourself. In this election, you have 3 candidates, including yourself. Do you feel that your support in the black community is stronger now than it was 4 years ago? And do you think you'll still get 46%, or will it be less?
Well, and I don't like to base everything on the polls, but the polls indicate that we've gotten stronger in the African-American community. I go generally by, anecdotally, what happens on the street and my interaction with African-Americans on the street, on Market Street, on Broad Street, in the neighborhoods. Bus drivers who happen to be African American open up the door and waving. So I mean, I don't sense an anger. I don't sense a disappointment anecdotally on the street. We'll see election day what happens, and I'm running hard in every community and doing my best.
Mayor, there has not been an incumbent mayor since the charter in 1952 that has run for re-election and lost.
Right.
Would you be surprised if you lost this race?
I would be surprised if I lost. I would be disappointed if I lost, and I would move on and do something else. Elections are fickle sometimes, and you have to accept the will of the people. I think the will of the people, as we can see it and as we feel it, will be to send me back for another 4 years. But that's why they have elections. We'll see May 21st.
We're speaking to Philadelphia Mayor Jim Kenney. You're listening to Philadelphia City Council Live here on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM. I'm your host, Vincent Thompson. We're also making this interview available on WURD's YouTube page and social media pages, so you can watch us as we conduct this interview. Wanted to get a little bit of your reaction to some comments that you made, how they were perceived in the press. During a recent meeting of the African American Chamber of Commerce, you were quoted as saying your administration has had trouble getting African Americans for top leadership posts. You were quoted as saying, quote, "We have a hard time hiring black people for these jobs because they're super talented and too overqualified that they choose to run after the private sector instead. They don't want to take a pay cut." Did you say that?
I've never used the word, I didn't use the word overqualified. I was speaking to an African American audience, so I was giving an example of potential candidates from that community. It is difficult to get people to serve in government at every stripe, because people don't, when they have the ability to make twice as much what they would make in government, they often choose that route. Or when we're trying to attract qualified candidates of every stripe out of the public sector or out of the nonprofit sector, it is a struggle. We're dealing with an issue right now with a high-level commissioner who happens to be a person of African American, and the rub right now in finalizing that is pay. So that's, I don't believe that was in any way derogatory.
So you mean, I just want to make sure, you're saying that there's a African American that wants to come into city government that you want to have for
Yeah, correct. For an important department head.
Okay.
And the rub right now, the thing we can't finalize is the pay, because the person has other options. Okay. And people have other options who are white. People have other options that are Latinx or Asian. I think that the writer of that particular column had a viewpoint that he wanted out, and that's how he wrote it. And as is his right to do it. He's the free press. We're not Donald Trump here. We want everybody to speak their mind and write what they want to write. I'm just saying that getting people to come into government is hard because of the disparity in pay, and also the other issue is one of the public nature of their work. I mean, if you work in a corporation or in a law firm, generally you're not answering questions from reporters, and I think that that's another element of this life, of this profession, that makes people think twice about working. I mean, and we have tons of qualified candidates in this region, everywhere in the Southeast region and across the country. And I will tell you, whether you believe me or not, that every time we have an opening, I say, get me a diverse candidate. Make sure there's a diverse candidate in the pool, or diverse candidates in the pool of people that are vying for this. And that's something we do. Well, we appointed the first diversity officer in the city's history, Nolan Atkinson, who has legendary history in diversifying, majority white law firms, and working with the African American bar to get young people into various law firms. When Marcel Pratt left his law firm, he was the only African American male in the firm. And we're happy we have him.
Now, Marcel Pratt, just for people that don't know, is your city solicitor, which is your chief lawyer.
Which is a member of the cabinet,
right.
And the top lawyer in the city. He's the lawyer for the mayor, and he's the lawyer for city council. And he's a talented guy who I listen to and respect, and usually follow. Well, not usually, I always follow his advice. And that's a good example of a person who. And that the example I gave at the meeting was he, with his talent and ability, could move into a private sector law firm and make twice, 3 times what he's making.
So you only.
By the way,
no, go ahead, man.
By the way, the law department is probably the most diverse large law firm in the city. There's not the same level of diversity in private law firms as there are in the city solicitor's office, and that's primarily because of the efforts of Sozi Tulante, who was the first, my first city solicitor, who was African American, and Marcel Pratt, who followed him, who was African American, and they have gone the extra mile to attract young black lawyers to work in city government.
Now, Mayor, 4 of your 14 members of your cabinet,
correct,
which you consider your inner circle, even though the mayors have differed.
Right.
I've covered a lot of mayors. Everyone kind of looks at the cabinet different, right, even though the charter has a specific right number. You have 14 members that you consider your cabinet. 4 of them are African American. Are you happy with the amount of diversity in your cabinet?
Of course not. I'm not happy with it. We're striving to fix it every day. But you have to look at more than just the cabinet. And cabinet is a defined group of people. You have to look at the people who are actually running the government, the people who are heading departments, our police commissioner, our treasurer, our commerce director. I mean, who happen to be in the cabinet also, right, but our streets commissioner, our prison commissioner, who was the first African American female prison commissioner in the city's history. Actually, we're being sued because by a white candidate who's angry that we hired her. She was the best candidate that I wanted her from day one, primarily because her background is not only in corrections, but it's in social work. We wanted to take a different approach to criminal justice, to have someone who has the ability, capacity, and experience to deal with some of our young folks who are incarcerated, who have serious social problems that we need to address. And we're actually being sued because I was too tough on a white candidate.
So, Mayor, how do you diversify government? Because there's 25,000 employees. You get criticism for the 1,500 people that you have direct hires, and that number is overwhelmingly white. But if you look throughout city government, it's overwhelmingly white as well. How does a mayor diversify a city government? And I'm saying this goes back to other mayors as well. So the issue has been under Mayor Nutter and Mayor Street. How do you diversify that? Because you can understand why people are like, the city is overwhelmingly black, 66% are people of color, but the city government workforce doesn't really reflect it.
Well, that's because we need to change civil service regulations to allow us to do certain things that we're not allowed to do now. There are certain regulations that hamper not only how we do hiring, but the length of time it takes to do hiring. And the other issue, frankly, is a lot of people who work in government spend their entire life there. So there's not a lot of necessarily attrition that opens up spots. We've been striving greatly to get more African American men and women into the police department, to have more diversity there, into the fire department, into the paramedic section of the fire department, and in recreation, for example. We have a need to have more people of color, more African Americans in the recreation department and the like. But a lot of times these employees stay on for 25, 30, 40 years, and it's hard to find spots sometimes for them. But I meet with Nolan Atkinson, who's our Chief Diversity Officer, every month. We go over the numbers. We go over the numbers department by department. We go over the numbers, the goals that we want to set. We sometimes have to pull in department heads who aren't performing the way we want them to do when it comes to diversity. Finance department in the beginning wasn't very diverse. It's it's more diverse than it was because we've insisted on a special effort to make sure that we go out and attract good people who happen to be people of color.
If you win a second term, will you fight to change civil service regulations?
We're working on that now. We're working on that now, and we will have something hopefully at the beginning of the next term for council to consider. Look, I recognize the problem. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, and I'm not saying that we're going to solve it overnight, but we have a intention and a heart to solve it because we think it's the right thing to do.
You can give us a preview of it now if you'd like to break news on WURD.
No, well,
Okay.
We might give you an exclusive, but we're not ready yet.
Okay, all right, but there is going to be a move
Yes.
to change civil service in the second term.
Correct.
Okay. We're speaking to Mayor Jim Kenney here on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM. You're listening to City Council Live. I'm your host, Vincent Thompson. Mayor, just to make sure that people are clear, Rebecca Reinhardt issued a report about the amount of diversity in departments.
Right.
And under exempt employees, she listed that you have, this is mayoral administration, 48% white, 37% black, despite the city census that shows 35% white, 41% African American. But I also want to mention, just to let people know, the city commissioner's office, for example, has a problem too.
Right.
60% of their employees are white, and the district attorney's office, which has 71% white. So I think everybody can agree that city government needs to do a heck of a lot
better, and we're closer to that number than we were, to that 41%, and we'd like to go higher.
Let's talk a little bit about the city budget, because one of the things, when you run for re-election, you not only have to do your day job as mayor, but also run to keep your job.
I've come to learn that.
As we conduct this interview, council is holding weeks of hearings on your proposed fiscal year 2020 operating budget. Back on March the 7th, you proposed an almost $5 billion operating budget for fiscal year 2020, which is more spending than the $4.8 billion operating budget in the current fiscal year, which is set to end on June 30th. This is the fourth straight year that your budget has seen an increase in amount. Why is that? Why can't?
Well, primarily education investment, which is the root of all our problems. When a child has not received an education that's commensurate with the needs to hold jobs in this environment, in this era, we wind up having misery. We wind up having people who can't read, people who can't be employed, people who might get involved in activities that we don't want them to be involved in, people who might wind up incarcerated or addicted. And if we start at the beginning, if we start at the 3-year-old perfect little child, perfect little baby, and we give them the resources that they need, initially through the beverage tax. And I know people don't like the beverage tax, but see, the beverage tax and pre-K is like ACA and Obamacare. Because if I've seen people interviewed and asked, do you like Obamacare? Oh, no, I hate it. It's terrible. Worst thing ever. Well, how about the Affordable Care Act? Oh, that's great. I like the Affordable Care Act. So on one hand, people are complaining about a small amount to pay on soda, which really isn't good for you anyway, and it gives people diabetes. And we've learned through the health department that 6% less children of color are drinking, 6% are drinking less sugar-sweetened beverages, which long-term will be a good thing for them on diabetes and obesity, but it's paying for more than 4,000 kids to be through this pre-K program, and we're going to ramp it up to 55,000, 5,500. Those children are on a track for success because they'll be reading at grade level by 3rd or 4th grade, and they will graduate 8th grade, they will graduate high school, they'll have college opportunities, they will have training school opportunities, they will have military opportunities, wherever it is they want to go, they will be prepared. And I think that is more important than the profits of soda companies.
Now, your opponents,
Yeah.
Alan Bukovitz, and I have to make sure that the listeners know as well. Alan Bukovitz and Anthony Harding Williams have said basically the soda tax is unnecessary, and they think that they can pay for these programs through the existing funding in the budget. Is it possible to pay for them through the existing monies in the budget?
They can't. They can't because right now they don't have to, and that's why they say it. They say it to pander to the soda companies in the belief that they're going to win the soda company lottery and they're going to dump a ton of money in their campaign. All right? We have a decent fund balance, $300+ million. It's not enough for the rating agencies. They would like to see a higher fund balance. So the percentage of interest that we pay on our borrowings is based on our bond rating. The more we have in our surplus, the less we pay in interest.
Basically what you have in your bank account, like a simple person.
The more we have in fund balance in our bank account, the less we pay in interest to borrow money for things we need, which means more money has to come out of the general fund to pay for the interest. So if they are thinking about rating the fund balance or rating the bank account to pay for pre-K, they'll be able to do it maybe for 2 or 3 years. The bond rating will continue to slide backwards because it's not at a level that the rating agencies want. We put $90 million in a rainy day fund because we possibly will have a recession or a correction of the economy. And the problem with taking the beverage tax away and paying for pre-K and community schools and rebuild with general fund money from the balance, it might not be there. We may wind up in a recession where we're cutting programs. We'll still be able to maintain the pre-K and the rebuild and the community schools because the beverage tax will still be in place. I mean, this has been going on for 3 years. And the reason why it's still going on is because the beverage industry is willing to invest tens of millions of dollars into a campaign to twist this issue to their benefit. I mean, and that's what they've done. For example, they sued, when we first passed the beverage tax, they sued us. They tied us up in court for 2.5 years, 2+ years, and then complained regularly that we're not spending the money on the programs that we said we were going to spend them on. We couldn't spend the money on because we didn't know if we were going to win the case. If we didn't win the case, we may have had to give that money back. So it's irresponsible for me to issue bonds for $300 million, to roll out these 25 community schools, to roll out the full 6,000 seats, 500 seats, and then we lose the case. And we got to take it all apart.
Mayor, the City Council under Maria Quiñones Sanchez got a resolution passed that will basically study the impact of the soda tax.
We're fine with the study.
But
as long as they study the impacts of the soda tax on improvement in school classrooms and in pre-K and in the neighborhood, not just the effect of the tax on the beverage industry. That's not a fair or apples to apples comparison.
Well, let's ask you this.
And I'll give you another example why. For example, I need them to study also the 270 jobs that have been created in the early education environment. I want them to look at the number of pre-K seats that have been expanded in neighborhood businesses, generally owned by African American women in generational business. They're able to expand their number of seats and pay their employees more money. They're able to fix up and renovate their spaces with the back of the house money that we've given them through the soda tax. I've had a woman come up to me about a month or so ago. She said, I have 2 children, 3 and 4. My husband works, but I could not go to work because I had to stay home because I can't afford pre-K or daycare for my children. My children are both now in the same pre-K. I just got a job as a bus driver, working full-time, with benefits, with health care. We have to look at the benefits of the families, not just to the children, not just to the detriment of the alleged detriment of the beverage industry, but what it's done to neighborhood families to give them the economic freedom or the time freedom to go out and improve their family's life.
But how do you answer shopkeepers like Jeff Brown, who owns ShopRite, and some smaller owners who say that the beverage tax has hurt their business and it just doesn't deal with sweetened beverages like soda? It might be sweetened beverages like sweetened milk. How do you respond to those?
First of all, the Jeff Brown saga of the Haverford Avenue store should be a novelette. The store was owned by an older man who wanted to cash out. He was tired of owning property, so he was cashing out. He sold his store to a New York firm, to a New York real estate firm. They wanted to renegotiate the lease with Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown had no interest in renegotiating the lease, so he left the store voluntarily. He knew that a year in advance. So now to pin that on little signs that say the beverage tax closed me down, the store was not in great shape. The store did not have wine and beer like his other stores do. And he wanted out. He's opened 2 new stores since we passed the beverage tax. So I don't know, I don't understand that.
And you said the other supermarkets are coming to Philly, right?
Well, let me say, I don't understand that contradiction. If you're being put out of business in one store, you open 2 new ones. And the other pressure on the Haverford Avenue store was the Aldi that was about a mile away that had more competitive pricing, so people were going to Aldi. So the store is going to be empty, not for long, because we've worked with Councilman Curtis Jones, with our PIDC, our Commerce Department, and we have a big grocer from New York coming down to sign a lease to open a store there. We have Giant, who is moving into Philadelphia with a number of stores. We have a German company called Lidl that's interested in moving in. They're building a $2 or $3 million facility in South Philly. Wow. So this narrative that somehow this, and honestly, if your business is based on the sale of soda, you need a new model. I mean, you need a new model, because it's basically what I understand about soda and supermarkets is that it's been a lost leader. They reduce the price so much that it gets people in the door. Right. So there are other supermarkets, other interests that are coming in to fill the void of Mr. Brown and anyone else who says. Now on the smaller stores, right.
The mom and pop.
I have some concern, and I have some concern about some reports of gouging. For example, I met a young man, like he's 19, 20 years old. He said, "I really like you. I like what you're doing. I like your policies. But you know what? You just cost me a full $1 extra on my 16-ounce bottle of soda." I said, "You need to go back to the store and get your 75 cents back, because the tax is a quarter." Right. So that store owner decided to put a $1 fee on there, $1 tax on there, and keep the 75 cents while remitting the 25. The other issue is,
because who's supposed to pay for the tax? I don't think a lot of people know. Is that the beverage companies that are supposed to pay the tax?
That's who we intended it for, was the beverage companies, the bottlers. It's assessed at the bottling plant. It's not assessed at the grocery store. But the other issue is we've given $100,000 credits, I think, on the WURD tax for neighborhood grocers who move to healthier products.
Now, for listeners that don't know, what's the WURD tax?
It's the business,
like the business.
It's the business. It's business taxes.
Okay.
But the point of the matter, and the other thing that's frustrating. All right, so I've decided that I'm not going to drink soda anymore because I think it's too expensive, or I think the tax is unfair. So I'm moving to water. Pick up your Dasani or their other brand, turn around the bottle, and look who bottles it. Coca-Cola and Pepsi. And where do they get the water? They get it out of Philly Tap. And then they purify it, put it in a bottle, and sell it to you for $3. I would be more angry about that than I am about 1.5 cents on the soda.
So just to make it clear, if Mayor Kenney gets a second term, there will not be, the soda tax ain't going away.
No, and neither is pre-K, and neither is community schools, and neither is 60-plus facilities, predominantly in African-American neighborhoods, that are going to get a major overhaul. And that all goes away. And any of my opponents or anyone else who says, I'm running to repeal the beverage tax, you should also say, I'm running to repeal pre-K, I'm running to repeal community schools, and I'm running to repeal rebuild, because that will be the effect of their repealing the beverage tax.
We're speaking to Mayor Jim Kenney here on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM. It's the City Council Live. I'm your host, Vincent Thompson. It's a weird transition, Mayor, but it's an important topic. As part of your budget proposal, you said that they're going to hire 50 new police officers, open more pre-kindergarten slots in community schools, fund a new gun violence reduction initiative, and further reduce the Department of Prisons budget by $12 million.
And that's based on the fact that, let's start with the prisons first. Okay. When I was running for office the first time, when I was running for mayor the first time, I remember doing an interview on WURD. And I remember one of your former colleagues saying to me, you're going to buy land in Northeast Philly, and you're going to build a prison, and then you're going to fill it up.
The State Road one.
Yeah.
That was the one.
Guess what we did? We got 3,500 people out of jail, and we closed the prison. And that was what our intention was from the get-go. And we're taking the proceeds of the savings of 3,500 less souls in incarceration and piling it back into the neighborhood through other grants and violence reduction, people with boots on the ground who have lived experiences. We're going to bring those folks into our circle of effort, and they try to get them out to be able to interact with these young people who won't necessarily listen to me, but will listen to someone who looks like them and has had experience that they can impart to them to keep them out of trouble. We're investing $36 million in violence prevention over the next 5 years. And that is new money. We have put in Operation Pinpoint, which is a way to interact with families and with young people who we believe are in harm's way, who we hear through social media or through other intelligence that there's people looking for them, or that we know of a neighborhood grudge, and we go out proactively with police captains and police officers, social worker people, violence prevention people, and try to engage those families, engage those communities, and explain to them how devastating shooting someone or being killed or shot and killed is to, and we're trying to keep you out of harm's way. We've instituted this in January. We've had January, February, March, a little bit of April. We're still struggling with the number. It's going up a little bit, 11%. But we hope that by the time the end of the year, we see a trend downward. But I will tell you, we could use some help. And if one of my opponents is listening, we need to be able to enforce our gun laws. We have gun laws on the books that Harrisburg, the state legislature, will not allow us to enforce. They want no guns control, period. And it's hard when you're doing all the things like improving education, improving criminal justice, hopefully improving the violence situation in the neighborhood, when the flow of guns is unending. It's unending.
So are you saying here one of your opponents is the state senator, Anthony Williams? Is that comment directed specifically to Senator Williams?
It's directed to the entire legislature, of which he is a member of. Yes, give us some help. Give the state some help. We don't need all the guns we have here. And we have laws on the books that Harrisburg has preempted, the legislature has preempted us, and we can't enforce those laws. Guess what else they're doing? They're trying to preempt the beverage tax. This is a legislator from the center of Pennsylvania who, I don't know if he's ever been in Philadelphia, introduces a bill to preempt our ability to fund our own education and to take care of our own kids ourselves without asking Harrisburg for any money. And they want to take that ability away from us. That's what's unfair.
Let's delve more into the murder rate, Mayor. It's an important topic.
Yep.
Since January 2016 up until April 7th of this year, there have been 1,030 people that have been murdered in the city of Philadelphia, according to the police department statistics. In 2018, 351 people were murdered that year, the highest one-year total in the decade, and as of April 7th, 87 people have been murdered, a 13% increase compared to the same time last year. Right. I did a little bit of math before this interview. If you add up all the murders that have happened since your tenure as mayor, it averages about 257 people being murdered every year. Over Mayor Nutter's 8-year term, which was 2008 until January 2016, he had almost 2,400 people who were murdered. That's about 300 people per year. Right. But the murder rate started going down in the last 4 years of Mayor Nutter's final term. Most of the people that are murdered in this town are African-American men. A lot of the people doing the shooting are African-American men. We all admit it's a crisis. Right. Looking back, do you think that your administration should have done more in your first couple of years to deal with this?
I mean, hindsight's 20/20, and one murder too many. So yes, it's heartbreaking for me. I look at the numbers every morning. I get angry. I get frustrated. I get sad. And we are doing our best in every area to address the problem. I will say that one of the things that past administrations have not had is this explosive opioid and heroin situation, which I think is there's about 100. Last time I talked to Commissioner Ross, it was about 130 or so murders that were tied directly to narcotics. And with the expansion of narcotics, of heroin and the opioid problem, part of that is attributed to it. Part of it is attributed to the number of guns that are available to people. You can get a gun faster than a library card. And the other issue is one of people settling their problems with armed violence, as opposed to what we did when we were kids, and we worked it out one way or the other, but we didn't shoot people. So it's trying to get into the space, into the heads, and into the lives of these kids that understand that pulling that trigger is a death sentence for the person you're shooting, but also a death sentence for you.
So you think you're going to have less murders this year in 2019 than you did in 2018?
That's our goal. Now, whether we reach the goal or not, we're going to see at the end of the year. Okay. But we have to have at least a year of our plan trotted out and working, as opposed to making a judgment based on 3 months of the plan.
looking back, and I just want to make sure I'm correct on this, do you think that, I guess what I'm trying to ask you is, looking back at the murder rate and your actions, I know that you would wish you had done more. What do you want to do in a second term?
We want to continue to roll out these anti-violence programs, continue to expand Pinpoint, continue to do our educational investments, which will keep some of our kids in school as opposed to having them out with no skills and putting them into a situation where they have to do things like be involved in drug activity or be involved in crime because they have to survive. And we're hoping that look, these are problems. We can argue about the rate. As I said, one murder is one murder too many. And we're working with the police department, with our social service folks, with the health department, trying to get our arms around this issue and push the number back down. But when 300 seems to have become the acceptable number. That's not acceptable anymore. To me, it's not acceptable, and we want to drive it down to zero. But as long as we have access to guns, high level of poverty, drugs that are fueling this thing, illegal drugs that are fueling this thing, and we're investing in the education portion of it to get our kids on the right track. This is serious. It's unacceptable, and we are doing a better job at it. And hopefully those numbers, we will see the better job in those numbers.
Mayor, when I told the public that I was going to interview you, as you can imagine, I was flooded with Facebook messages and text messages about questions that people wanted me to ask you. So I'm going to ask you from some of our listeners.
Just like my word, my monthly
it is,
word.
It's just like that. But it's also it's not your angry tweets segment either. So
good.
But these
you filtered those out.
I did. Well, I didn't filter all of them out, but I got enough of them. One of the questions that I got was from Joel Wilson. He wanted to ask, due to the impact of real estate revenue to the school district, does Mayor Kenney think the 10-year tax abatement should end now? If not, why not?
Well, I think the 10-year tax abatement worked. I think it worked for almost going on 20-some years now. The development we've seen in the city probably wouldn't have taken place at the rate it's taken place without it. Council is of a mindset to adjust it in some way, not eliminate it, which I think would be a mistake, to adjust it in some way so that it's less, it's shorter, that it's only, some people are saying it should only be applied to properties developed that are under a certain level of cost, that people who are buying $500,000 or $1 million condo shouldn't get it. I would argue that we need wealthy people in the city in order to pay for some of our poverty needs until we get all of our people up in rising boats. If council wants to do something with it that's within reason, I would certainly support them.
So what would you support, Mayor? What would they have to come? Would you support?
Yeah, I'm not going. Here's why I can't answer that question directly. Is because we're going to have to. I don't know what they want to do, and I don't know what the economic analysis of it would be. Once we have that, I can make it. But I am willing to, with the will of council, to sign something that addresses some of the needs that are felt in the community. I totally recognize the optics of a young couple moving into a $400,000 house next to a senior citizen that's lived there for 50 years, and why are these young whippersnappers getting paying no? That is, and I also recognize the pressure on council from the community to do that, because even though they can write to me, get to me, see me on the street, they know exactly where to find our council person. So and they're the ones who are dealing with the complaints. So if there's something that comes out of council this year, this term, next term, that addresses the perceived and actual inequity of it, I'm willing to sign it.
Let's get a question about jobs. This comes from J.T. Childress. What is Mayor Kenney's plan to create more livable wage jobs, especially for Blacks and Latinos? And they also want to know what you're going to do to help with diversity in the building trades. Let's talk about the livable wage jobs in the city.
We signed an executive order that requires all of our contractors to pay their employees and the subcontractors $15 an hour. We have worked very hard down at the airport with some of the subcontractors there who are paying people really substandard wages. People working for 10, 12, 15 years, making $8 an hour. Many of them women, many of them women of color, people who tried to unionize and were harassed and fired, and shifts were changed, and we got into there and fought that fight. Now they have the ability to organize, which I think is the best thing to do when it comes to fair wages. Is you're a member of a union and you negotiate with your owners, and you come up with a fair wage, working conditions, health care, pension, and that's all done internally with no need for the government to codify it or to legislate it. We're a prime promoter of $15 an hour, and we also, and this goes back to, I know I sound like an education kind of constant talk about this, but in order for us to get our kids in a position that they can take the jobs that don't pay substandard wages, that pay the $40, $50, $60 an hour jobs, we need to have them educated. We need to have them certified. We need to work with community college, even in a more deeper way, to bring in other programs. And that's why we had to settle that contract as quickly as possible, because we didn't want disruption in the education process. We didn't want kids to miss graduation, which they would have if it had been a protracted strike. To change the curricula of community college, to have more certifications, more licenses, more things that you can take out of that school and go and get a job that pays a good wage.
So what do you think is going to make Philadelphia better for someone who wants to work? Because Philadelphia also has a problem of 1 out of 3 people who read below grade level. So if people aren't ready for the jobs that are available because they can't read, so what realistically does the city have to do to prepare our 1.5 million citizens for the jobs of the future? Because some of your opponents are saying, you know what, there's jobs that people can do that requires their hands, more work at the port, that kind of thing.
I worked on that.
Okay.
I worked on the port.
But you see what I'm saying, right?
We've gotten the ILA.
And even the port you need high tech.
We got high ILA. Well,
you need to read to work at the port.
But you can have no high school education and still work at the port and make $40 an hour.
Okay.
Right. So what we did was we worked with the Holt Logistics Company that runs Packer Avenue Marine Terminal and the International Longshoremen's Association to set up an apprentice program to train people in the maritime skills that they need. That is soon to be up and running. We worked with the laborers union to help them get their facility on Broad End, where William Penn High School was.
Yes, in North Philadelphia.
Get that built up and running. We're working with a reentry program to get people into programs and classes that will teach them to read, teach them how to do math. We have a program with Coded by Kids. It's not Coded by Kids. It's run by the people Coded by Kids up at CFCF, which teaches people to write code and build a portfolio of work, so when they leave incarceration, they have something to take to an interview with them. We're working, and I'll go with the building trades right now. We are working with through a program Penn Assist, which is the development work that's going on out in West Philly by Schuylkill Yards, to have a pipeline of young folks coming out of our CTE schools and coming off the street also, to be able to pick a trade that they're interested in. We've done these building trades have sponsored these boot camps where young people come to a site and they talk about, they get a thumbnail of what the jobs are, and then you pick something that you like, and then we funnel you into a training program. We're working with organizations like Power Corps and others where these kids come out trained and certified to funnel them to the union and to also funnel them to city employment. We have a policy called Best Employer with the city, where we give people the opportunity to move in on a part-time basis to begin with in the streets department, in its fleet management, in the rec department and others, where they can work seasonally for like 8 months or so and then become eligible to be brought on as a full-time city employee. We've had about, don't hold me to the number, but at least 20-some young people that have been hired by the city in fleet management, in mechanics. And I'll tell you what happens, though, and this is a good thing, it's not a bad thing. So somebody comes out of CTE school and they go work for fleet management, and they work in there for 4 or 5 years, and they're gaining the tools that they need, and I mean the physical tools that they need, because you're going to buy your tools and stuff, and they're getting the experience they need, and then they leave us, and they go and get a job for $100,000 at an auto dealership, and that's wonderful. And then we use that spot and fill it again. And continue to use Philadelphia's model employer. So
what in your mind as mayor, what can Philadelphia government realistically be expected to do to help prepare for jobs? Is it private sector that's got to do training? Does the city have to do training? What is it?
Our workforce development people have an expanded role now in having a place for people to go to get the information they need and to get into the programs they need to gain the skills that they require for order them to become gainfully employed. And we're doing more than any other administration has done in that workforce development space. And Pat Clancy, who runs that, does a great job over there, and we're making progress. But the thing I want people to understand is these issues have been going on for generations. I've been mayor 3+ years, and we've made great progress. And we need to make more progress, a lot more progress. But I can't flip off the poverty switch in 3+ years when it's been going on for 50 or 60, when we were losing all the industry that we were losing, and neighborhoods were seeing a different dynamic when it came to employment opportunities, where you could walk to work at the factory. Right. That was going on for years. No one's addressed it till now. And I don't mind being criticized for not being as effective as people would like, but I don't like being criticized for not trying, because we are. And we're working hard at it every day.
Let's ask you 2 other questions. One question we got was the status of the Rizzo statue that's in front of the Municipal Services Building. Yeah. Do you support that coming down? Yes. And if so, when will it come down?
Yes, I do support. I never supported it going up. I didn't think it was appropriate for it to go up. We have no other mayor with a statue, and I don't want one either. So Rendell even himself has admitted that if he had thought about it a little longer, he probably would have put it there. The issue, as I understand it, because I didn't live as a black person through the 60s and 70s when he was in his heyday. I think it's offensive for people to have to go into that building, to pay their real estate taxes, to do city business, and to walk under the guise of a person that in their life made their life miserable, or created an environment in the city that set our city back for a generation. And I want it moved. I'm not spending $200,000 to move it yet. We're going to have work that's going to be done at Payne Plaza. All those things are going to be, all those little doodads and chess pieces and stuff will probably leave. We have some physical work to do because the plaza is on top of the concourse, and it's starting to degrade, so it's starting to leak and other things. So we need to fix that. When we tear up Payne, which will be probably next year, the statue will go.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear. So the statue is planning to go sometime in 2020.
Whenever the work at Payne Plaza starts, he will leave. He will move.
When is it supposed to start?
We haven't done all the design and stuff yet. Okay. So look, when you're doing construction projects, I can't give you an exact date. Right. You ever have a guy work in your house? Yeah. Does he always show up on time? Does he always, does you have to make, I mean, even with construction projects in the city, they take, 6 months, 7 months, 10 months longer than they should. But part of the problem is there's no place to take them. I mean, we've been told generally with the spots that we've raised, they don't want it. So I'm going to be stuck with location. But
why don't you put them in storage?
We'll work on that. It may happen. I don't know. Okay. All right, but we didn't want to disrespect all the people who look up to him for whatever reason, and we wanted to try to do it amicably. What happened was Councilwoman Gim made the announcement during the Confederate statue removals that we should move him. And I want it moved, but it's not like my number one problem. I mean, it's not. I got other things that you brought up in the last hour or so that are more important than Frank Rizzo's statue. Okay. I don't like it either. So you understand, we just want to make sure. I don't like it either. Okay. And my political history has been always against him. I mean, I worked. Fumo and him used to fight all the time. So I was never a Rizzo person, and I was always on the wrong side, on the opposite side of him when it came to his politics. So I'm not a fan. Let's ask a couple more questions in the limited time that we have with you, Mayor, and I do thank you for taking the time to be with us here on Philadelphia City Council Live. The status of the Rebuild initiative. $500 million program over the next 5 to 7 years to fix up rec centers, libraries, and other places. Now, we've had people contact us who say, listen, that $500 million rather, might have been better spent fixing up crumbling schools, and that infrastructure. Why not do that instead of spending it on the library? Well, we are also working on the infrastructure improvements for the schools. It's going to be about $1 billion program that's coming online to address issues like lead roofs, play areas, condition of classrooms, heating and cooling systems, those kinds of things. So we can do two things at once. The issue is that the rebuild money from the beverage tax was coupled with $100 million from the William Penn Foundation. Okay. That's the largest single contribution they've made to any effort. So if we didn't do rebuild with this 300 million, William Penn wouldn't have added the other 100 million. And the other 100 million that comes from various other governments is triggered by the investment of both the philanthropic sector and the government, triggers other amounts of money and about $100 million. So, but Dr. Haidt has there's about $3 billion to $4 billion need for our schools. We may have to wind up, and I'm not, don't hold me to this because I'm saying these are just things that are being discussed. You may have 3 crumbling schools or dilapidated schools in a general neighborhood. What you might want to do is build a new school and then just close those schools down so that all the kids at the right time, at the same time, would go to the new school, which would be state of the art.
Now, Mayor, the rebuild folks have told me that they have done studies and like 400 plus buildings citywide could use repairs.
Right.
But that the rebuild money is only going to maybe fix between 200 and 250 projects. For $500 million, shouldn't we be able to get all 400 projects fixed?
We have a separate capital budget for that purpose. But these, I mean, if you look at Bear Recreation Center, which is going to be one of the first ones done.
That's in South Philly.
It's horrible. And we're probably have to do a tear down and rebuild. And that could be a project that could be about 7 to 10 million or maybe more if you put in it also into the fields and stuff like that. Get the fields up to date, get the irrigation systems. So if you're spending $7 to $12 million a project for a total rebuild, a total tear down and rebuild, that starts to run out after a while. And there's 64 projects that are on the list right now, and the vast majority of them are in African American neighborhoods.
Final question to you, Mayor. In a second term, if you win, what is going to be your main focus in a second term?
Education and getting that homicide rate down.
Also, what do you want your legacy to be?
I don't think about legacy. I really don't. I think legacy.
Most people would say every mayor thinks about legacy.
I don't think about legacy. I'm telling you, I don't think about legacy. I don't think about how wonderful I am and all this other stuff. I think that people will determine what they think about me and what history thinks about me when I'm done. When I'm done, if I don't run for anything else, and there's only limited things to run for at my age, I will accept the verdict of the public, and hopefully it'll be a good one. But I will know, even after I'm out of office, that I worked hard every single day for every single person in the city and try to understand the problems that people face in various neighborhoods. Some of them are similar, some of them are much different, and to try to understand the cultural nuances so that I can best serve the people who elected me.
What keeps you up at night as mayor? What are the issues? Because I recently saw you at a press conference where you shedded a tear for a young person who talked about
Make me cry again.
I'm trying to.
I'll bring it up.
No, but I'm going to bring it up because the young woman said that your programs helped improve her life.
And that's amazingly impactful. And with all the stuff that I deal with relative to adults who are misguided or rude, even in this campaign environment where people are saying stuff that's not accurate and I have to deal with it. With all of that stuff, when that 5th grader tells me that I impacted her life for the positive, that's my legacy.
What's the one thing about Jim Kenney that people don't know? Some people think you don't really like the public part of the job, the ribbon cutting, the shaking hands. What is it about Jim Kenney we don't know?
I enjoy people. I enjoy interaction with people. And in this environment, because Trump, because of the national environment, and because of anonymous social media, our interactions have become poisoned. And when I can have good interaction with people, socially on the street, at a community meeting, in my office, in a church, in a mosque, that's what I enjoy. I don't enjoy rude people. I don't enjoy people who heckle you from the car. I don't enjoy those kind of things, and that's part of the job. And it probably bothers me more personally than other mayors, but that's just my personality. And I'm at 60 plus. I'm not going to probably change my personality.
Mayor Kenney, thanks a lot for taking the time to be with us here on Philadelphia City Council Live. Appreciate the time. Good luck on your re-election. Again, thank you for listening and watching to this interview. You can also listen to Philadelphia City Council Live on the radio every Thursday when City Council's in session. We're on from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time with the rebroadcast coming on from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM.